Hello. You're here with Megan and Amanda of Homeschool Moms Unfiltered for our next episode. So, today we are talking about brick and mortar teacher turned homeschool mom. Right. So, this is not new. Uh, we see it often. We hear about it often. There are lots of other podcasts and Instagram things out there that you can see. So today we're specifically talking about what are the advantages and disadvantages of classroom experience as a homeschool parent. And we have with us a guest. I will go ahead and let Megan do the introductions because she is personally familiar with Sarah.
Welcome. Our guest today is Sarah Smithers. Hello, Sarah. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I am good. Sarah, are you a brick and mortar teacher turned homeschool mom? Is that why you're here?
I am. What a coincidence that I'm here for this podcast episode.
Didn't it work out so lucky like that?
I love it.
It's like we planned it or something.
I know, right? So Sarah and I have worked together in the homeschool genre and world and education and online tech and all of that stuff for a number of years. And Sarah is not new to the world of homeschooling. So she's had plenty of time of experience in both worlds. Are you shocked that our intro, Sarah, involved talking about disadvantages? Do you think there's plenty of brick and mortar teachers who are brand new to homeschooling who are thinking, disadvantage? I come to this with way more experience than most people.
Yeah, and it was surprising to me as well because, if you think about it on paper, think about it analytically, it makes sense that a classroom teacher would naturally transition into homeschooling. And in some cases, that is true. There are definitely some overlaps. But there are some disadvantages too, some things that I'm still unlearning 7 years in. And probably will continue to have to unlearn and kind of de-school myself.
Exactly. And we've talked about deschooling in prior episodes, right? We are also kind of societally conditioned as to what education has to be, should be the only path to success, etc. And in some cases, brick and mortar educators actually have more deschooling to do because they were fully in that environment. So it takes some time.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely it. We talk about it often, but I'm not sure that we've ever actually really spelled out the fact that deschooling is, for the most part, probably more for the adults than for the kids. We have such an idea in our head of what education needs to look like and what it needs to include. And for the most part, we're wrong.
Yeah, there is one and only path to success, right? And it is that you have to sit in a chair for 6 hours a day, be taught by somebody who went to school to do that thing, and take these exact steps, or else the whole plan goes to shit, right? And that's not actually true. So there's some work to be done there. So I want to dive into your background for a second. Before I do, if you're watching us on social media or on YouTube, you might notice Amanda has different background today. It's Amanda's birthday and she's traveling. So hooray!
So welcome to my hotel room. You're not in my bathroom with me this week. You're in my hotel room.
I don't think we've ever actually spelled out, Amanda, that you podcast from your bathroom, from your spare bathroom, because when you live in a tiny condo, that's the space that's available sometimes.
Yep. Yeah, that's my primary studio is our second bathroom because all the other rooms were claimed by other people. So there you go. We did maybe in like the very first one or the intro, I made a point of saying it, but it's true. It's kind of just, it is what it is now. But yeah. So we have a hotel room today. I sent the family out. They're out collecting breakfast. And so let's get this on so I can have breakfast when we're done.
Exactly. I love it. Well, happy birthday. So Amanda, actually, Sarah, hello. Wrong person, brain not working. Normally we start off our show with a kind of a recap of what's going on. And I do want to dive right in since we have Sarah today, so we'll skip our recap. But my recap item was that I'm going to take a nap after we record today. And I've been looking forward to it pretty much since the moment I got out of bed this morning. So I'm super excited about that. So my brain apparently is not entirely screwed on at the moment, but
halfway to nap already.
Oh, can't wait, right? So would you share with us a bit about your background as an educator, Sarah? What did you do? How long did you do it, et cetera, et cetera?
Sure. So I worked in brick and mortar education for about 4 years. I had slowly transitioned in working with what we then called intervention services. Some people call it special ed, any number of things. I actually went to school with the intention to become a high school language arts teacher. Never taught a day of high school in my life ever. I ended up teaching primarily third and fourth grade language arts. And then again, with a focus on intervention services, we had a co-taught classroom. So I worked hand in hand with our special education services team in the traditional classroom.
Okay, excellent. I find that really interesting because our current book club read is Jonathan Mooney's Normal Sucks. And there's a lot of talk about special education in there. Have you read that by any chance, Sarah?
I have not.
It's a really good book. It's really, really awesome. And he's going to be on in a couple of weeks. He's our
Oh,
guest. I know, it's super exciting. But there's a ton of special education related discussion in there. So you might find it pretty interesting with your background. Okay, so I think just about there's no perfect job or profession or role, right? No matter what you do, even no matter how much you love what you do, there's going to be frustrations. So I don't think any of us are under any delusion that, especially in the world of social media where we see educators sharing what their existence is at this point. But like, what were some of your frustrations in the world of classroom education and instruction?
sure. So, like you said, there's no such thing as a perfect job, right? One perfect job. I knew, like, from a very young age that I wanted to teach. That was like the one thing I really wanted to do. I've always been very passionate about education. And like that was my dream, to have my own classroom. Like I remember seeing, my name on the door, and it was just this super exciting moment. And I still treasure that moment. I came home that first day with my own full classroom, and I said, I love teaching, but I'm not sure I love public education.
Day
Like
one.
that first day, because I automatically kind of in my gut, I was like, I'm not teaching as much as I thought I was going to be teaching. There was a lot of, I was teaching in a middle school model where we switched out classes. So I rotated 4 classes in and out. I had a homeroom and then 4 classes, and like all the time spent lining up, packing up, unpacking, going to the next location. And then we had specials and assemblies, and it's someone's birthday. And those things are all awesome. They're all wonderful. But I'm like, I am not spending nearly the amount of time that I thought I would be actually teaching, like with actual instruction. And again, because of the population that I was working with at that time, we had some significant gains that the state expected me to make because they weren't hitting expected levels, which is a whole other topic, right? I know. But for public school education, we're supposed to be making a certain number of gains, hitting certain metrics. And I'm like, how am I ever going to do this if half of my day is spent lining up, packing up, waiting for everyone to be quiet? I have some high achievers who are done super early. What do I do with them? Then I have other learners who are struggling. What do I do with them? And so every time that I talk about homeschooling and like why our family chooses to homeschool, I'm always very clear. This is not a slight against educators. My goodness, they are doing the work of 5 people
Yep.
with the pay of barely one. And there just aren't enough hours in the day. And the schedule just isn't set up to hit all of those things that you need to hit.
And the system isn't set up to support teachers, right? The
Right.
system that we have in the United States, it it makes it almost impossible for a teacher to truly succeed in the way that we want them to succeed. And I don't know how we fix that, right? In the meantime, you've got a whole bunch of us homeschooling. So that actually flows in perfectly to my question for you. And that would be, when did the idea of homeschooling kind of first enter your orbit?
It entered my orbit really early on when my oldest, who just turned 20, can't believe it. When my oldest was in preschool, I kind of had that like tingling, like maybe this is the right thing. And it just didn't work for our family situation at that time. I had to be working outside of the house. She is still gifted and was doing really well in school. So we continue that. And she did. My oldest went all the way through public and private school and into college. And so I kind of put it off to the side. Then when my younger two were going through the school system, my youngest was really not enjoying his preschool experience. And it was something that it was a 3-day-a-week program, but it was affecting our entire week. Where it was just this constant, when is school? I don't want to go, things like that. So, and at that time I was transitioning into teaching online, and I was interacting with homeschoolers who were awesome. And I was like, oh, because I think, and myself included, I think a lot of us have this notion of homeschoolers are weird or antisocial, or, like, I don't know what exactly I thought was going to happen. But I'm meeting, all of these kids online who I'm teaching, and I'm like, they're really cool. Like, they're really smart, and they're doing all of these things, and they're telling me all about these wonderful things. So long story short, we transitioned my youngest to homeschool first because I was now working from home. And then shortly thereafter, my daughter, who is now going into 8th grade, the end of 2nd grade, we brought her home as well. And it's been just absolutely a perfect fit for both of them since. And it was one of those, we'll try it for a year. And we just keep trying it for a year. Just keep trying. And every year at the end, in my house, they do have a say. Like, if they came to me and said, we really want to try public school, we would absolutely do that. I know some families maybe, are more stronger on one side or the other, but every year we just kind of have a get together, as I like to call it, a come to Jesus, and just say, hey, what are we doing? What do we want to continue? And so far we have continued every year since. So going into 6th grade and 8th grade now.
I love that.
I love that too. And we do the same thing, right? When my husband and I are talking, I'm like, I can't envision a world where we stop homeschooling. I see him going this route until he's ready for university. But the reality is we have a lot of those conversations, right? It has to be the right fit. And we do revisit every year. Is it working? What we're doing, is it working? What can we change? What do we need to change? What should we change? And, it'll break my heart if at some point it really needs to be something else. It'll also be much more expensive, I'm certain. That's a whole other podcast.
Right.
But yeah, I do agree. And it's true. There are some families that are just, like, we're not there. We're not going to talk about that. But we are one of those families as well. That's like every year we're going to sit down, we're going to have a debrief, and our debrief might be a little bit more businessy than your come to Jesus. But yeah, they're both equally important.
Yeah, and it's not, I know we use the phrase come to Jesus. It's not a religious thing.
Yeah.
It's just like listen, this, this is it. So you say it, and we're going to start planning, one way or the other. Like, this is where we are. So, and they have asked me, they'll say, well, Mom, how are you going to feel if someday, we choose to do something else? I'm like, I will be sad when it's over for whatever reason, whether that's because they're graduated or because they've chosen a different route. I will, of course, kind of mourn that stage of my life, but I always tell them I want what is best for you. So if you are doing what is best for you, I'm happy for you.
Absolutely.
In our house, we don't have a meeting like that or an official conversation like that, because there's a million little conversations that go on throughout the year that are like, Could you even, not from me, but from the kids, right? Could you even imagine they get up so early, or they have, they have to carry like 400 books around, or they have to do this, or they'll find out something about school. And they're like, oh, that's awful. Right. And so we never even like have the formal discussion, because there's all these kind of little micro discussions that are like, it's not even on the table. Now they might decide that they want to do more online versus more this, or they might want to take a college class or dual enroll. Those are conversations that we're having. But I already know, like, the conversation with my kids, they'd be like, ew, never. You can't wear pajama pants. Like, that's not a thing, right? And they're like, I'm out,
As the years have gone on, our conversations have become much shorter. And now
Yeah.
they sound much more like what you're describing, Megan, with like, oh my goodness, I could never,
Yeah. They're like, no, please. They've
Early
been home so
on, like
long.
my daughter, we were convinced she was actually going to go back because she desperately wanted to ride the school bus. Like, that was really something that was important. And, part of that conversation is saying, okay, I support that, but let's think this all the way through. Like, after you get off the school bus, this is what's going to happen.
There's 6 hours after that, and then you get
Yeah.
back on the bus. Like, I could get you a bus pass. We could just ride the bus around town, right?
Right. Well, and she outgrew that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is no longer a thing. So.
I have a picture of my youngest. So first of all, he wouldn't have ridden a bus until middle school. It would have been a really long time, because the elementary school was at the end of our neighborhood. But he wanted to ride the bus. And then the other thing was, you got a card for the cafeteria that you could swipe to do that. And he didn't even want to buy lunch. He wouldn't have eaten any of that food, but you could get ice cream on Wednesdays. And so he just wanted to have a card with his name on it where you could swipe it and buy ice creams. And that was really his whole thing. And so we went on a field trip really early on in our homeschool days, where we went to a limestone quarry where they mine limestone for cement and stuff like this. And to go into the quarry, we had to park like a block away, and they brought in a charter bus because it was too dangerous to be able to drive through. And it was a really nice bus with like cushy seats and air conditioning and all that. And I have this picture of him on the bus. He was so little, and he was just like, I'm on a bus, right? Like, he was just like, check it off the list. I don't need to go to school now. I've been on a bus, And it's kind of become this joke, like, when we're traveling, and like when we did like the big London double-decker bus, I was like, this is way cooler than a school bus, isn't it? And he was like, yes, this is way better than a school bus, or like we did the channel through like under the English Channel, and it was like, better than a school bus? Yeah, better than a school bus, And I was like, okay, cool, we're good. We've checked off the requirements, So I love that. I did want to circle back to something that you said earlier, Sarah, just because it's a constant conversation in the homeschool world. When you talked about your classroom, your experience, as far as like the amount of time spent lining up and waiting and transitioning and doing this and doing that, there's this constant disbelief, I feel like, whether it's from homeschool doubters or from new homeschoolers who cannot believe that you can homeschool your kid in, depending on the age of the kid, right? Half an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, depending on what it is, right? That homeschool should not take you 6 hours a day, unless you're Amanda and her kid, who he wants like an 8-hour school day. And he's like, but mom, please, can I have more school? Right? Like, that's a different story. But if you're feeling like you're not doing enough because you're not sitting there for 6 hours a day doing sit down schoolwork. Sarah, did you ever have a day where you did 6 hours of sit down schoolwork in the classroom?
No. And I would venture to say, and I have had this conversation with many people many times, my kiddos, now that we're in middle school, we do about 4 hours of work a day, roughly. Some, it kind of depends on what we're working on. But I would venture to say that we are doing more schoolwork, homeschooling, in 4 hours than we ever were in public school. Because, again, speaking from my own classroom experience as a teacher, we were never finishing the whole curriculum.
Right.
When my kids were in public school, they were always bringing home like unfinished workbooks and things like that. And that's pretty normal. Like, again, not shade, but that's a normal kind of experience. Whereas I have the opposite problem, because we're always finishing our curriculum in April, and then we always go like through May. We end usually like second or third week of May. And I'm like, I've got nothing left, because we finished history a month ago. We finished, this forever ago, because we can go at our own pace and kind of get through it. So yeah, I think a lot of public school families and public school teachers hear, oh, 4 hours of school a day, and think that like we're actually doing more than
Right.
we would if we were in public school. I would say out of the hour that I had my learners in the classroom as a public school teacher, I'd say only 20 to 30 minutes were instruction.
Yeah. Wow. That's
And not
bananas.
one-on-one instruction, right? It was trying to teach
No.
everyone and then trying to make sure that hopefully everyone got at least some of what you were teaching, right? It was not
Mm-hmm.
20 minutes of actual, they learned this topic. And
Mm-hmm.
again, that thing, no shade. That's the
Yep.
reality of teaching a group of
Right.
students, right? I've tutored plenty of times and taught for summer school programs and camps and all that jazz. Like it's a whole different ball game, which
Mm-hmm.
actually, again, I'm like, you're just making this really easy for me. So my next question was going to be, when you jumped into homeschooling and you made that switch, what were some of the things you did to prepare for the start of like, okay, I'm in a homeschool now. I'm not going to be teaching in a classroom.
Well, when I started, I just had a preschooler, which that's pretty easy peasy. You're doing real basic, kind of numbers and shapes and colors and things like that. So we have always been a curriculum type family, but we piece it together. So I don't traditionally get like an all in one curriculum. We grab things that we enjoy and kind of throw them together. But like his preschool and kindergarten year, I was still very much in that public school mindset. Like it's funny and embarrassing at the same time. Like I was making a report card for my kindergartner because in my head, right? Like in my head, I'm like, this is how I am proving that he learned, which is ridiculous. Sorry for those of you who do report cards. I'm not calling you ridiculous. It was ridiculous for me doing a report card for a kindergartner. So yeah, I really just started going through kind of curriculum and figuring out what kind of homeschooling family we were. And what was nice was that I started my youngest so young that we were able to grow together. And then by the time I brought my daughter home at the end of second grade, I kind of had my stuff together. Like, okay, like now I kind of know who we are. Like we need just enough structure to keep us focused, but like not super regimented. We kind of subscribe to the model. Julie Bogart described it best, and I think she was quoting someone else. But it's like the breakfast, lunch, dinner model. Like, you have to feed you have to feed them. You have to feed them breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But maybe they had a really huge breakfast, so it's just a snack for lunch, and then we're eating something for dinner. So like maybe we're really, really in deep on this history unit that we like. So maybe we're not going to be doing science, as much right now or doing other things. But we're getting all of our meals in per day. So that's really kind of where I started, just figuring out what was going to work for us, what was going to work for me as a mom who has always worked from home while homeschooling. I have been a stay-at-home mom, but not while homeschooling, ironically enough. So it's always been kind of a balance of how to fit those things in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So aside from not giving your kindergartner a report card, is there anything else that you would have changed for those early days? Like if you could go back and talk to your fresh out of the classroom self 7-ish years ago and be like, don't do that. Just don't. Just stop. Right? What are those things?
Yeah, I mean, and on one hand, like if I could actually go back and change it, I wouldn't, because I think it has informed so much of what we do now, where I go, oh, that, I can laugh about a report card now. And that reminds me, like, yeah, you don't need to do this, because as we get older, I start to get that, like, I have one approaching high school, where I start to kind of worry about that again. And then I go, no, you're okay. You're all right. It's all right. Yeah, but I guess if I were to go back and tell myself something, it would just be not to stress out as much as I did. Because they are going to learn, they're going to get what they need to get. Again, as long as I am providing the breakfast, lunch, and dinner, that educational breakfast, lunch, and dinner, I'm putting it on the table every day. As long as I continue to do that, they are going to get what they need. And I think that's really hard. That's a really hard thing to do as a parent. It's a really hard thing to do, again, coming from the public school system, because I don't have a district telling me what metrics to meet, or, you have to teach this curriculum. It's all on me. I get to choose it myself, which is great, but it's also scary, because then am I making sure that I am giving them what they need?
That is so true, right? Because whether you're curriculum focused, which we are also, we do a curriculum as well as additional classes, or you're an unschooler, or anything in between or beyond, right? There are so many options out there. There are thousands and thousands of classes, and there are hundreds of curriculums, whether you're looking at all-in-ones or you're looking at things specifically for history, or, the Charlotte Mason way to do it all together. There are just so many options out there. It is so easy to so quickly become overwhelmed, especially if you're that type that wants to make sure they've researched everything before they pick, because you just cannot possibly research everything that's available, right? Like, you have to just be like, okay, I'm going to pick the 10 that I see the most, and I'm going to research those, and I'm going to pick one. And if it doesn't work, we'll try another one of the 10, right?
I took what you said about not being so stressed as part of my journey, right? So our journeys have looked very different homeschooling, but okay, so we're recording in May, right? And for the last month-ish, I've been seeing, and I know you're all in a ton of Facebook groups for homeschooling too, so you've all probably been seeing the same things. A bunch of like, if I pull my kid out now, how do I finish the first grade, right? If I pull my kid out now, how do I finish the second grade? And so it's interesting because yesterday I ran into a neighbor walking the dog. She's a speech teacher in the public school system. And then my son vends at the farmer's market on Tuesday, and a guy came to his booth, and he had it's right next to the school. So there's a lot of kids that come afterwards and stuff like that. And he had his badge on. So I knew he was a teacher. And I said, how many days do you have left and whatever? And he was like, we're so done. He said, we've already turned in grades. I don't even know why we're still there. Like, this is so ridiculous. We're just there checking off days. Right. And that's when people ask me, would you go back and change anything? Would you do anything different? That's my number one regret. It's really the only regret that I have, is that I didn't pull my kid out sooner. He was in the second grade. He was having a really hard time. And I was nervous about how I would finish second grade. I was nervous about, well, how will I know what they've already covered so that I can finish the second grade and make sure he doesn't miss anything? Yeah. And all these years on, I'm like, this is the dumbest thing. Like you said, like, you can laugh at it now, right? And I'm like, yeah. First of all, absolutely nothing of consequence happens at the second grade. I'm sorry, but like, nothing makes or breaks your child's life in the second grade. Absolutely nothing. My child was struggling with mental health in that environment. It was like a crucible for him. Nothing in the second grade is more important than my kid's mental health, physical health, any of the above, right? And then, you're having these conversations with teachers at the end of the year, and they're like, we're burnt out. The kids are burnt out. We're watching movies. We're having parties. We're having field day. They're not doing anything right now. They are not doing anything in class that is productive. And even if the teachers are trying to, it's one in one ear, out the other. Like, these kids are not getting it, right? And so I think that's the big thing. Like, I should have pulled that kid so much sooner, but I was stressed and I was worried and this, that, and the other thing. And it's like, none of it is that stressful. And I'm talking a second grader. Even if your kid's a senior in high school, it's fine, right? Like, it's all fine. It all works out and it's going to be fine. Somebody gave me advice years ago, like, cause I'm like I jokingly refer to it, those of us who lived through like 9/11 know we had that terror alert scale that came in after the fact, right? And like, I'm a red terror alert level person. I can get there really fast and really easily over really stupid stuff, right? And I was talking with somebody one day about it, and they were like, when has the red terror alert level thing that you are currently obsessing over, when has it actually happened? And I'm like, well, never,
Never.
and they're like, so could that be wasted energy? Right? Like
Right.
just maybe. So it's like, whatever it is that you're stressing about with homeschooling, it's fine. It's going to be fine. Let it
Mhm.
go. It's fine. We promise, right?
Yeah.
Collectively, we've been homeschooling for like a really long time between it. We're at like 20 years between the three of us. We promise you it'll
Yeah.
be fine.
Yeah.
It's going to
Right?
be okay. It will be fine. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, it will be fine. All right.
Oh,
Oh, sorry, Amanda, go ahead.
oh, no, I was just going to say we established that knowing how to write a report card was not something that you needed to bring into your homeschool life.
No.
But I was wondering, what other ways do you feel your previous classroom experience and like classroom management actually strengthens your role as a homeschool mom?
Sure. Well, the great thing is I don't have to use my classroom management tools anymore. Yay! So that's awesome. I don't have to worry about anything like that. If we want or need some kind of accommodation, we do that. So that is a wonderful thing that I don't have to use anymore.
Mhm.
But I absolutely still do use like kind of the tools and tricks that I have learned to break down topics. Because what I personally still struggle with, especially now that my kids are getting older, I know Megan and I have talked about not being math people. So if with topics that I know how to do it, but I don't know how to explain it. So that's where that like teaching education that I, had going through school. I'm like, okay, how can I break this down into more manageable chunks? How can I explain how I got here? And then, of course, because I'm of a certain generation, I learned how to do many of these things differently. Like carrying the one or borrowing over here. I'm like, oh, this is actually what we're doing. Never even occurred to me that like I was taking a 10 from the tens place and turning it into 10 ones. Never occurred to me until I was a homeschooler. So I learn with them every day still. But so I think that is probably the skill that has carried with me the most is just learning how to break things down. And then even within someone's family, I have two children who learn differently.
Mhm.
They have different strengths. So I'm still differentiating and like still like my daughter, I have to tell a story or make some kind of cute little, well, this number's doing this. And then they tell everybody, okay, my job here is done. Poof. I feel like we have to do that. My son, he's like, I don't want a story problem. I don't want you to tell me anything. Just what are the numbers? What do I need to do? Here's how we go about it. So I think still having that education mindset of everyone's brains work differently. You have to break it down differently. That still carries with me.
Yeah, I could
Mhm.
absolutely see that. We talk a lot about differentiated learning in our home and in our circle, right? Again, because we tend to be on the more aggressive academic side of homeschooling, um, and I have it easy, generally speaking, right? Because I just have one kiddo, so I get to spend all of my time figuring out how to help him and how to find him the differentiated learning within where he is, right? It's not for 3, 4, 5 kids. I can't imagine how much harder that is, right?
Yeah, I think too, when you're talking about differentiated learning, another common topic that I see come up all the time, again, because we're just so societally programmed with what things need to be, like, how do I get an IEP for my homeschooler? So, Sarah, like, as a homeschooler for many years and as a classroom educator, like, ha- is there a purpose for an IEP in the home? Okay, understanding that in some states and in some
Yeah.
places, an IEP might get you services, it might get you
Yes.
speech or something like that. But beyond that, just from a learning perspective, is there a place for an IEP as a homeschooler?
You are the IEP, right? I everyone's on an IEP when you're a homeschooler because that's what it stands for, individualized education plan, right? You are individually teaching each child to their strengths and weaknesses. So, and I would venture to say most people, adults included, are asynchronous learners, right?
Mhm.
So maybe you struggle or take longer in one area and you move faster in another area, right? We all really need an
Yeah.
IEP. It's not just for struggling, although I know in the public school system, that's how we use it. And you're right, Megan. I wanted to qualify that with, I know in my state of Ohio, there are services that are available. So if that is something, because I want to make sure I say that if someone is thinking about pulling their child out to homeschool and they're concerned about losing those services, check your state, check your district. If you have an IEP, you may very well still get to continue those services. But in terms of your education, congratulations, you are the IEP. You get to write the goals.
Yep.
You get to determine if they're making progress, and it's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's it. When we went through the assessment process, and it was that kind of thing where almost every assessor we met said, this is probably not a problem for you because you are already providing the accommodations in your own home. And so you haven't noticed it being a behavioral problem or a behavioral issue. And you might find if you put him back in a classroom that it is a behavioral issue or it is a problem and it needs more. But at this point, you don't, it's not an issue. You don't need it. You don't this, that, the other thing. And so it is. And there is that balance, right? Like we don't need an IEP. Maybe in our state and in our specific situation, testing is an issue. And so you might want the 504 accommodations and you might need to try to fight for that, depending again on your state and whether or not you have to do standardized testings or things like that. Because I can do all of the accommodations in the world, but if he has to go to do a test that's proctored by someone else, he can't take those accommodations unless he's got the state paper that says,
Right.
I get to have these, right? So it does depend a little on your situation, but for the most part, you get to provide all of that at home and make sure that they have a successful learning environment without butting heads with anyone else or fighting or researching and stressing on what it looks like.
Yeah,
Yeah.
as someone who used to sit in those IEP meetings as an educator, first of all, they are stressful for everyone involved. And I know many parents are left really fighting for their goals. Like, we really want them to be doing this, or we really don't want them to be doing this. So, yeah, as a homeschooling parent, you get to decide what those goals are. And we do state testing by choice. It's at home, it's untimed. And there's a section for accommodations. So I just put on there what accommodations we are using and, go from there. But I had a child who was probably going to be placed on an IEP had they continued because they needed more individualized learning. And now they are about 2 grade levels ahead of where they should be. So it's like, okay. So it wasn't necessarily that it was an actual educational difficulty. It was more so they didn't have the tools that they needed in the environment they were in.
Mm-hmm.
And once they have those tools, it's like, oh, surprise, we do know, that we are able to get an appropriate education and make appropriate gains and learn the things we need to learn.
Yeah. I actually just recently updated testing for my kids with diagnoses because my older 2 are older teenagers, and we are reaching that point where I've been individualizing anything that they need and providing accommodations. But now we're reaching college stage, and it was like, okay, a note from mom or isn't going to do the trick, right? Like I'm going to need diagnoses letters within a certain time frame or something like that. So there's definitely a time or a place or a circumstance, but generally speaking, if your reason for hanging on to public school is because you're not, this IEP, not service related, but just in general, like, how do I get this thing? They don't need it. They don't. You are free. You are free to do whatever your child needs, and you don't have to fight for it anymore. You can just do it. It's way less energy and way less time and way less stress. So it's pretty awesome. So Sarah, you kicked us off with conversation about deschooling. Are there any deschooling resources or steps that you took that you would recommend to somebody who's leaving the traditional world of education, like a book or, kind of an aha moment that helped you?
I wish I had those resources, because that's kind of the thing. At the time, I didn't realize that I needed deschooling, or even what deschooling was, until I was well into the homeschooling process. And not that it was too late, but by that point I had kind of done it on my own.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't necessarily have any resources to share, but just much more of a mindset of what we were saying earlier. It's going to be okay. There are no emergencies in education. Like, the building isn't on fire. It's okay. If they don't learn it this year or this semester or at this age, that doesn't mean they're not going to learn it. Because again, I had what I thought were some struggling children on my hands, and then they just needed some time and individual education. It's like, oh, they're actually way above. Like, at this point, if we're working at grade level, I get concerned, because we've traditionally been like ahead. I'm like, oh, okay. All right, we're okay. So I think really the key here is time is your best friend. Give it time, take a breath. And you know what? And if you are 2 years down the road and you are still really struggling, then maybe you can start, I don't want to say worrying, but you can start researching maybe other ways, or, other things that you can do to help your child with that particular subject.
Mm-hmm.
I love that, right? Give it time. And if after you've given it a couple of years' time and it's still not coming together, you don't need to worry yet. But it might be time to do some research on what your other options are,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
That's
Don't
great.
panic. It's all good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's going to be fine. Right.
Yeah.
Sarah and I kind of have a saying, and it's from one of Amanda's favorite books, actually. Amanda and I talked about this the other day. Debbie Reber's book, Differently Wired, about neurodivergence. And she talks about her work life in there, and talks about the fact that, like, she would remind herself when it came to her work life that there's no heart in the cooler. She's like, I'm not
Yep.
transporting live organs here. Like, there's nothing that is at that level where I need to be panicking at that level. And so, Sarah and I have had this conversation, and the other day, Amanda and I had the same. I was like, there's no heart in the cooler. We're good. And it's just
Yep.
kind of become this thing, like, it's fine. As long as there's no life or death consequence here, it'll all be fine. It'll work out.
Mhm.
So no need to go to the red terror level alert. That's my daily reminder. It's going to be fine.
Yeah. So I guess I have one kind of last wrap up question for you, Sarah. And that would be, do you have any tips that you would give for former classroom educators, or maybe someone who's in a classroom right now and they're thinking, I might need to start homeschooling in the next year or two. My kiddo's coming up, or, whatever. They're kind of seeing the writing on the wall. They're thinking I might need to start homeschooling, and they're at that stage of like, I don't know. I'm not sure if this is a good idea. Like, what tips would you have for them?
So my first tip for anyone always is to just put into Google your state and homeschool, just because that's a really great place to start. For me, I had a friend who was in my state who was homeschooling, and was able to just kind of walk me through, like, listen, here's what the law says, but this is what it actually means. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Like, that's easy peasy. Not super difficult. And then, really focusing on that teaching aspect, I would, and this is essentially what I did, I would really focus on what you enjoyed in the classroom as a teacher, and what your students enjoyed, and carry that into homeschool. Like, what did they really like? For me, it was telling the stories about the numbers, and, things like that. How can I make this interesting for children who are really uninterested in this topic? That I really enjoyed. I really enjoyed the actual instruction part. Um, we don't outsource all that much at this point. I think we're going to start here soon, because we're getting to those higher levels. But we don't outsource much, because I enjoy teaching. So if that's you, focus on that. I enjoy picking out curriculum. I know what to look for in a curriculum because I've seen so many other curriculum that did and did not work in the classroom. And then, the opposite, whatever you didn't like, get rid of it. Like, we had a horrible clip chart, which is again a whole other topic for another day. But I would have to like move their clip based on what another teacher said, and get rid of anything you don't like. You don't have to carry it with you. You don't have to bring your classroom management strategies into your home. You don't have to have a traditional school desk or a table or whatever else. Something else that we love in my house, school supplies. Love school supplies. So we go back to school shopping every year, whether like we need anything or not. We're like markers and glue sticks and pencils because we love it. So just take those things that you really enjoy and carry that over into your homeschooling journey.
I love that advice. So I feel like I'm constantly jumping in here. At some point, you can tell me to shut up, Megan, and you can actually have a say. But it made me.
I get to talk to Sarah all the time. Have fun. Hang out with Sarah. You're good.
Okay. It made me think about the fact that my all-time favorite class ever was one of the very first classes I took in university. And the class, it was kind of an all-day thing. It was a special thing. But I went to Chicago. I was from a small rural area. And in Chicago, every day we went to a different house of worship. And I knew almost nothing outside of Christianity. And, like I thought the differences were like Catholic and Methodist and Lutheran, and so for the first time we went to a mosque and we went to a synagogue and we went to a true, like a Southern Baptist kind of place, like this whole variety. And I learned so much more than I ever would have learned just sitting in a classroom reading about it or being lectured about it. And I think that really informs the fact that we are part-time world schoolers, right? We pack up and we go and see and experience things all the time. But like I just now today during this podcast made that connection to the fact that was the class that most influenced me in all of my years of education, and the fact that that's what I'm doing with my kiddo from the jump. So that was some great advice. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. That was my thing too. I loved my public school education. And that's why I wanted to become a teacher. But I am able to pull those things into our homeschool. Because as you were talking, I'm like, oh yeah, we do these really cool hands-on things that were my thing in school. That's what I really like to do, like plate tectonics with graham crackers and peanut butter. And we did a model of the sun by making a pizza. And like my kids still to this day will say plate tectonics and they go, oh, that's graham crackers and peanut butter. I'm like, yes. Like that's how we remember it. They're like, oh, that's that graham cracker and peanut butter thing. Like, yep, it is. So that exactly what works for you is probably going to work for your kids too, right? There's, I'm sure, some kind of genetic component, where you like world schooling and traveling, and we really like hands-on kind of cozy baking projects or making a grocery store in our kitchen to learn money. Yeah, so I agree with you there.
That is an interesting connection that you've both made, because while you've been talking that out, I made the connection, and I'm the unschooler, right, who's revolted against everything traditional. I despised school, right? It was a means to an end. I had to do it. So I made the most of it, right? And I did the bare minimum of what was required of me. I was super smart. I put in no effort. Took me nothing to get the grades that I needed to, but I went to school so that I could play sports, right? Like it was a means to an end. I have to get these grades because I need to play sports. And I went to a very aggressive private school where, the percentage of, it was an all-girls school, the percentage of girls that went to Ivy League and did this and did that and went on to get PhDs and all. And I just remember like junior and senior year when they were making all these plans, I was like, you're voluntarily signing up for more of this. Like, I mean, I did get a degree in the end, but like they were in it to win it. They were super excited about it. And I was just like, right? And so it's not surprising that I've completely burnt the temple down and rebuilt something, because I was like, it was, to me, it was just, I saw so much of it on a day-to-day basis and was like, this is the most useless info. Why am I learning trigonometry? Like, this makes no sense to me, right? And so I built the world that I would have appreciated at that age. And here are my parents who were like sending me to this mega bucks private school thinking like, oh, all this. And I was like, no, none of this is working.
Yeah, but probably based on what they wish they had had, right?
Right. It just keeps going.
We're all trying to recreate the best parts of what we had or what we wanted for our kids, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because for my parents, college education was so important. It was like, I've never really used my college degree to an extent, but like I have it. But that was the thing, right? My dad worked to put himself through school, and my mom went back to school. She had gone to community college, but it wasn't a thing, for her. She was a girl in a time frame where it was like she just needed secretarial skills, and that was basically it, And so later when I was 10, 11, 12, she went back to school and got a degree in political science. So to the two of them, that the effort that they put into getting their college degrees and the work that they had to do, not just for the schoolwork itself, but to pay for it themselves, and for my mom to do it while she was juggling, raising me and all that, was so important to them that I was like, all right, I'll get a degree, but like, I literally was like, I want to stay home with my kids and kind of do my thing. And so none of that was important to me. So it's really interesting. Like, that's a whole nurtured versus nature debate that we've kind of stumbled onto. That's really fascinating.
I know, right? We could do a whole nother podcast on it.
But exactly.
We won't monopolize Sarah's entire day. And frankly, it's my birthday. I got a lot of plans. So
great.
And it's your birthday, and you're in Vegas for your birthday. So Amanda's like, I gotta go. Let's just
well, we got an ad. Let's do our ad. We got some things to talk about still.
Wrap it up here, okay? Yeah. All right, I'll jump in and do the ad. That's my birthday gift to you, Amanda. You can sit back and relax, right?
Drink my free coffee.
Exactly. So we want to take a moment to thank this episode's sponsor, Hub of Curiosity. They are our premier sponsor. Hub of Curiosity believes that learning begins with interest, and they offer a wide range of classes on OutSchool to enrich your homeschooling journey. They also offer virtual, secular co-ops for middle schoolers and high schoolers. You can find a link to their class offerings in our Instagram bio or in the description on Spotify or YouTube, wherever you're watching/listening to this. There's a link to Hub of Curiosity there. And there will also be a coupon code for $15 off your first Hub of Curiosity class, which is OFCUR115. So check out their offerings, and they are amazing. So thank you for your sponsorship. It is time for our rotating segment, and Sarah has been kind enough to contribute our segment. So this week's rotating segment is
Messy Moments, where homeschooling mishaps become our favorite stories.
So what do you have for us, Sarah? What's your messy moment?
Well, first of all, I have so many. Right? So many messy moments. But I know when you asked me, it was something that had just happened. My daughter just turned 13, and we are really good friends with another homeschooling family who have children the same age as our kids. And we like to go, we do ice skating, we go to the zoo, we do all of these things, of course, in the middle of the week, in the middle of the school and work day. And we typically have the place to ourselves. So for her birthday, we were going to go with this other family to the zoo. We have a really awesome zoo in our area. And we pulled up, and the entire main lot was full of school buses. The entire lot was nothing but school buses. We were in the overflow lot. This was in the middle of the week, 10 o'clock in the morning. Apparently, we had picked the one day that every single school in the area was doing a zoo field trip, and it was absolutely jam-packed. The zoo was a zoo. It was so busy. And we are not used to that as a homeschooling family. My kids are like, shouldn't all these people be at work and school? I'm like, yes, they should.
What are they doing at our zoo? Right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So we had a
Not
great
okay.
time. But it was definitely not the experience that we had anticipated.
Yeah, I feel we used to have that when we lived in Florida with summer camps. And we would go to the water park and you'd pull in and all the buses would be there. I'll never forget, we were waiting. We waited ages and ages and ages for the BFG to come out. Remember when Disney did the BFG movie? We were so excited for it. And we were staycationing at the beach and it was a rainy day. And so we just like spur of the moment, hey, the movie starts in half an hour. Let's go, right? And we got there and the whole theater was filled with camp kids. And I have nothing against kids having fun, camp kids, etc. The problem is they're typically not supervised very well. And so they talked through the whole movie. I mean, if you were at the movies with your kids, you'd be like, shh, we're at the movies. Remember, everyone else is trying to watch the movie. But a bus full of campers, that's not how it works, right? And so it was quite the experience. It was not quite ideal.
Yeah. We have a similar kind of issue, right? Because we're in San Diego, I try to, for part of my like self-care, I try to once a week get together with a girlfriend in Balboa Park and we go for a little walk and then we go either get a coffee or we get lunch, depending on what our availability is and how it lines up. And like the end of April and all of May, we were both having to park it felt like miles away because all of the schools, right, from the entire county, they're all coming in for their field trips because you've got all this. Well, you have the zoo there, you've got all the museums and all of the stuff. And they make it a whole day. And then we went for a parkour class just the other day, and it was like there was graduation happening and I couldn't find parking anywhere. And I was like, what are these people doing? This is our zoo. This is our park. This is like, I can always find parking. Like, we're not going there. We're not going there again until September.
Yeah, that's it. We're done, right? We get so spoiled. I was chatting with a neighbor yesterday about year-round schooling because it's kind of been a topic of conversation here. And her kiddo kind of made this face. And I was like, no, it's amazing. Because when we lived in North Carolina, my kids were homeschooled, but the school system was a year-round school system. And I was like, it's amazing because you can vacation when it's cheaper. You can vacation when things are less crowded because you have all these really big chunks of time throughout the school year. I'm like, it's amazing to have an offbeat schedule. Take it from a homeschooler. We know, right? So I was like, it's pretty good. Did your kiddo have a good birthday, at least, Sarah, though?
Yes,
Okay.
she did. We had a very nice time, and actually everyone had to leave to go back to school, right?
Like two.
So,
Yes.
right. So we were able to stay longer and enjoy the zoo after everyone else had to leave.
All the animals slowly crept out. Like, oh my gosh, the other animals are gone, and you got to actually
Is it
see
safe
things.
to come out now?
Yeah.
I know, we're so very spoiled with our quiet and secluded places, right? Very good. Well, birthday girl, you want to wrap us up with our closing mantra for the day?
I would love to. Okay, so today we've got teaching at home isn't about being perfect. It's about being passionate. Trust your instincts and embrace the unexpected.
I
Some
like
of the
it.
best learning happens during the unexpected, during the chaos, right?
Heck yeah. So just roll with it, right? Good times. Well, Sarah, thank you so much for being our guest today. We appreciate your insight coming from classroom into homeschooling. You've got such a nice chunk of time in both worlds that you're an amazing expert for anybody who's making that transition or in thinking about it and just kind of knowing that it's all going to be okay. And that there's, in addition to taking all your teaching information home with you, there's some homeschooling information to kind of infuse in there to really create a successful blend in that environment. So thank you for coming and sharing your experience with us today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. It was great. Thank you.
Well, have a wonderful day, everyone, and happy homeschooling.
Yeah. See you next time.